それではですね、Day3 の、クロージングの方に、入っていきたいと思います。
So we'll now be moving on to day 3 closing session. It was a long day, but very much. How was it? So in this reflective space, we also will have Mr. Inamura and also Nahum from the earlier session. Thank you, both of you. So I'm assuming you're both able to hear the English interpretation all right? Wonderful. Thank you very much. So as we had earlier, in this reflective space, we hope that the audience can listen on and think and reflect for themselves as well. What sort of impressions you're left with? What do you feel in your inner self? I hope you are able to think about these sorts of questions through this space. So I'd like to ask a little bit to Mr. Inamura here. After being here for today, how did you feel, or what did you think?
Yeah, sorry. I think today's session has been so holistic. You know, we started off today listening. We going all the way back, and we are hearing from Tanaka-san about what is happening in the oceans all the way up to the mountains. So this kind of connection from all our different territories, and in a way, I think, well, even we ended today with Nahum-san into outer space. So we really covered a lot of territory, but then I think we also had a very beautiful way of exploring those different places and relationships through, for example, Iguchi-san's admiration for the lioness and how you can be part of a species beyond yourself, because you can be connected in such a way that you can transcend those borders, and then also becoming water, like the example from Uchino-san about the voyages on the Hokulea, and then even maybe becoming water itself by being hit by a waterfall in the kind of Shugendo trainings. So we really sort of explored a very, very broad territory, and then considering how we relate each other within such a vastness. So I feel very like the kind of happy tiredness, like you've gone for a long swim. So it's kind of my impression of today. Yeah. How's that to start?
や、本当に、本当にそうですよね。
I
今、
really agree.
まさにおっしゃってくださいましたけれども、
Jews talked about being holistic, or this idea of holistic. We looked at all sorts of topics today,
山伏の修験道
about urban design, about Shugendo. We also talked about sociology. We also had Nahum have this creative space.
領域テーマなんですけれども、
Covering all of these different territories, I feel like there was a lot of connection. We could see a lot of bridges between these different territories and rhythms.
ロランドさん
And that's what I really felt. I think Professor Vasquez used a word called relationality in his talk. But
っていうもの、存在そのものが
when we consider this idea of the self,
記憶を取り戻していくっていうのもそうですし、
thinking about how the self can connect back with Earth and with our environment.
関係を
And as Mr. Uchino discussed as well, this idea of connecting with the ocean, with the sea as well. I think
human beings というか、なんか、で、
this
その
idea
human
of relationality between beings
して
is,
いくよう
and
な、
that story itself, I
す
think,
ごく、
I think that message itself is what was really important, and what I really felt through today's sessions.
中村さんに、もう少しお伺いできればなと。
I wanted to ask a little bit more from Mr. Inamura,
結構その、
but
まあ、ニュージーランドに、ね、ご出身で、で、その後、
I think
UK
in being from New Zealand, and then after that, being in the UK for design for sustainability, and then returning to Japan after that,
するわけなんですけども、
and now your work is based here.
ポストヒューマンセンタードデザインとか、
But this idea of this post-human centered design, or ecosystem, or ecological design, I think these are some of the territories you cross over in your field of study. But when you look at the themes that have come out today, and thinking about this idea of connectivity or relationality,
なんていうかな、自分と世界の関係そのもの、
in combination with thinking about how you relate yourself with the world around you, I'm wondering if you have sort of any ideas behind this idea of connection, or and I think that it's sort of a shame if we could stop here in terms of the conversation. When we think about things from the perspective of design, how do you feel about this?
I just listened to your conversation in Japanese, so I, by mistake, maybe I should have switched.
You can go either Japanese or English.
But yeah, it's fine. I think I am fine with that. But I just need a tiny second to switch things up. But yes, I think the very interesting thing about the way we identify with other species, or with each other, or even with planets and this kind of thing, is to and in relation to remembering or remembering, I think is very important to design, because the way today we talked about today when Hoshino-san talked about, and the way Vasquez-san talked about our culture, that has developed of greed or intense desire, which is also very human. But this kind of desire-driven thing is, in one sense, being very much accelerated by the practice of designing. We are sort of making those senses of desire more intense, because we have focused on designing only for other humans' values of desire. So we've kind of, I think we can say that everything from like, fancy cars or even beautiful art galleries, these things are intense desired things, you know, or beautiful handbags or anything around us. So, but then remembering, I think it is in a sense is that we need to recognize that the kind of truth that actually, I wrote in the chat a little bit, but our bodies are mostly made from cells that are not human, mostly made from other biological micro organisms like gut flora, you know, different types of bacteria or even viruses. You know, something like 60% of our body is made of non-Homo sapiens. And skin is not a solid wall. It's made of many permeations, the kind that the radiation that Nahum talked about, the signals that pass through our body, it's very permeable. It just looks very solid. So we have told ourselves stories of humans as these kind of complete shells. But actually we are, to use a confusing word, colony of many different species within each human. So I think in a post-human sense is to realize that even in a scientific level, we are not like this individual that we like to think of. And that's kind of the harsh reality is that we are not this kind of single thing. So we are a fluid and liquid in the way that has been discussed today. So saying that you are part of nature is a very, very biological fact, even by the academic standards. And most of the way we design our society and artifacts in the way that Vasquez-san talked about today, the violence of that is that we have closed our eyes to the sensitivity that many of our forerunners, the people who have brought us here knew in a very gut level, a gut way of knowing, because the gut way of knowing is also an interaction between yourself and the biology of multiple species in a conversation. So when you are upset, the gut flora is reacting to that. So this is the kind of dialogue that's actually happening. So the sum reaction is not just a human thought or just a brain, but a kind of dialogue with many species. So I think the harshness of that is remembering in one way.
いやー、ありがとうございます。今お話しいただいた
Thank you very much. What you just talked about, I think that really talks to this concept of AWAI, of the in-between and the combination of humans and non-humans as well. We talk
っていうとどうしても
or have that word, but we always think of ourself as a dichotomy to the other. But we are also, as we said, a colony. We are made up of many different things. And, you know, in combination of all of these things, we are alive and we live. And so, and I think when we think about materiality, and we live alongside this concept as well. So in this, we
こう私たちの物語をこう
as humans, and when we think of ourself as well, we exist within this relation or this relationality with other things that are human and non-human. And so I think this was a really interesting point. And I'd like to ask some more from speak with Nahum a little bit about moving forward. And I think you used this idea of the space through your work, but something that resonated with me was this idea of the space technology and thinking about not just space, but thinking about how to reconnect with yourself and reconnecting with Earth. I think this concept was something that came up in your conversation, and I thought this really resonated with me. And I think this really with the theme of your art as well as this forum. And so, you know, what I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about how you feel or what you think about this idea of relationality and connecting the self with Earth or self with your surroundings.
Yeah, I think, well, thank you very much again, and congratulations for such an extraordinary festival. And well, I'm here listening, and you know, all these ideas resonate really strongly with me and my research and what I believe it's important. It's true that perhaps in the beginning, for the sake of simplicity, we started like dividing, you know, like many things. We divided the soul and the body. We divided, you know, like well, white people and people with different skin and tone. We started dividing nationalities, countries, and then we are, you know, like human and non-human, you know, like until yesterday we thought that we were not part of nature, and then we look today at ourselves and we find that we are in a very critical moment where we're suffering the consequences of crashing nature, right? We thought that was never going to touch us, but now if you look at breastfeeding milk, is full of microplastics. So we are so much part of everything. And this is something that we denied. And taking this to the space perspective, sometimes very simple truths are forgotten, you know, like I love the gesture of astronauts going to space and where do they look at? You know, like the first chance that an astronaut has to gaze into space, what do? They look back at Earth. they don't look at the black window all the time. There's not much to see from that perspective. The most incredible spectacle is happening here, and that's where I always joke, you know, that especially in the past, astronauts come from the military. You know, they're like very well trained fighter jet pilots. So imagine that we sent fighter jet pilots to space, and when they come back, we receive philosophers. They come with all these messages of unanimity and being one, and this is a psychological effect called the overview effect. That's when they look at Earth, they see Earth without these lines that we have artificially drawn in the map, these imagined communities, these fantasies. Because at the end, everything is a fantasy, right? These are stories. And some stories are utopias, no? Like thinking of a planet without borders, but also some stories are dystopias, like imagining that we are really divided and that if I trash the atmosphere, it will have no consequences for the rest of the world. So the point is, I'm very interested in how we see the future, right? Because it gives me a kind of compass to see how well we're moving into that future. And this is where I get very depressed between us. Because if we see at how we're envisioning our species outside of the planet, we see it with the same paradigms that have created such a mess in our world, which are basically three big problems. We see colonialism. We talk about the conquest of space, about colonies. Second, patriarchy. Space exploration is a game of mainly white men. Yes, there are women astronauts, 10%, and that's not a reason to celebrate at all. And third, capitalism, the extractionist capitalism. which is right now we see it in the space field with making a business case for profit by mining. So if I take, if I think how well we are developing the ideas of the future, I'll say technologically and scientifically, great. Culturally, kindly, bad, terrible, So it's time to reconfigure the stories that we tell to ourselves of how we relate to a stone, to a cloud, to someone with a different skin, to the moon. Or soon we will also experience the anthropocosmos, like a new era of human interference beyond the planet. And we already see that, this is not science fiction. Our planet is low Earth orbit. It's full of trash. It's a problem. 2 days ago, NASA and SpaceX, they had to sign an agreement for not colliding their satellites so we don't create more trash in space. That's happening already. So we definitely need new narratives to engage with each other. And I especially have a problem saying non-human, because it's again putting this separation between humans and non-humans. So with the world, with the natural spheres.
まさにその間というか、その淡いのその領域なのかなと思いま
So
した。
really that in between, this concept of the AWAI, that's what is the AWAI. And you just talked about this idea of the compass. But this isn't necessarily to gain new information or knowledge, but as
その
Vasquez mentioned earlier, so I think the idea is not to get information, but the idea is of deep knowing, that we need to process things in order to understand at a deeper level. And I think I really resonate with that idea of how we process information as well. And as Mr. Hoshino as well mentioned, that we should not be trying to think, but to really feel. And that's another way of knowledge and understanding. And so we need to go into our deeper consciousness in that understanding of what is created from there. And that creation itself is something, a separate entity too, that can exist on its own. And so I think all of these sort of ideas that have been introduced today really connect together. And we are really wrapping up here because it's almost time for closing, but we have a recording here that we want to show, a graphic recording. We had 3 sessions today, but what we actually had was we had a graphic recording happening in the back in real time, creating this sort of visual representation of our forum today. We can share this later on for those who would like to see it. And for the next sessions as well, we'll be able to get this here. I'd like to ask a little bit more from Mr. Inamura as well. We have a little bit more time, but personally, I felt so many things throughout these sessions, and one thing that left a impression on me is this idea of stillness, to become a plant, that you're the same as a plant in a sense, in essence. And when we think about this concept of stillness and remembering or returning to the state, that really left an impression on me in sort of that process itself. So this may connect or not, but you wrote a lot in the chat as well. For example, about New Zealand, about First Nations or Indigenous culture, and the connectivity. And you wrote here Aotearoa as well. which is the indigenous word for New Zealand, name for New Zealand. But if this is sort of your final comment as well, but if you could, speak a little bit more to these concepts that you introduced in the chat as well. And so we had Mr. Vasquez speak as well, Professor Vasquez, but I would love to have one more session or another session, a conversation if we can. But so Aotearoa is in the Maori language, and it is the word or the name that is used for their land. It means the land of the long blue cloud. And so they are the same people, or sort of the brothers and sisters of those people who are indigenous or First Nations in Hawaii. So to put it simply, one middle of the Pacific and the other went to another direction. So depending on which canoe they came from, this was written and was recorded, and it was also left in their art. And so it's recorded as a visual history as well. And so if I exaggerate, I have to think about, which tree did I come from? Or when we think about this sort of visual representation, we come from a certain place, but this is the process of remembering. But this is something within culture as well. In Japan, we have this idea of naming, or to name something too. And I think that the canoe and the history that it represents is something very important in the remembering of history or remembering of culture for Aotearoa in New Zealand. So this idea of navigating with the moon, or using the I wrote this in the chat as well, but this idea of manaaka. And so this is this idea of moving forward with nature. So on this day, we should go hunting. For this day, we should go to the ocean. This is a good day to do this. This sort of learning is sort of a way of listening to nature, of a way of communicating and communing with nature. And I think that is something that connects very well with Mr. Hoshino and this idea of learning and being one with our surroundings. So this stillness in listening, the quietness surrounding that, the way of listening that we should have originally had in ourselves as human beings is not necessarily something that we see all the time, but it is something that we have. And I think this is something that Mr. Hoshino talked to. And I think stillness is essentially this idea of listening, or to hear, to truly hear. And I think if we're not able to have that balance, we are unable to also remember at the same time. That process does not go hand in hand. So that's what I was thinking about. I think Naho Iguchi talked about this earlier as well, about spaciousness and this silence, and holding silence is a part of deep listening. And that is what it really means to listen and to understand and for deeper knowledge. And I think that those concepts all connect together. Thank you very much. And lastly, what I'd like the last day of our forum. So we have this graphic recording. We have Miss Izumiyama made this fantastic graphic memorization of this. We also have our wonderful interpreters here who have been doing simultaneous interpreting and making sure that we're able to listen to this through various languages. So thank you very much.
本当にありがとうございます。
Thank you very much for all the simultaneous interpreting.
で、明日最初は
Tomorrow is our last day for our forum. And tomorrow we'll start with embodiment and harvesting. This is a session. We have Ms. Ogasawara who will be joining us, and we will be doing some body work. And after that, we will move on to a harvesting session. So what we will be doing is we'll be putting our audience or participants in breakout rooms and do a little bit of a session talking about how we felt, things that we're thinking, and I hope that we can take some time in this way. I think there's been a lot of listening involved in this forum, but I think that through the chat as well, we could experiencing different things. So I hope that we can, overcome this idea of borders and countries and languages, and have a conversation with one another as well through this session. So if you would like to, please join if you can. Right after that,
濃厚なセッションがまた続くんですけども、一つ目
we'll
が
continue on to another session. This is a realm of resonance in dark ecology. We will have Mr. Shinohara, who is a philosopher and an artist, who will be here to discuss this topic. So when we think about post-humanism, or when we think about galaxies and the beyond, I think these topics as well are relevant to our forum and what we've been thinking about. So we want to incorporate this new perspective into thinking about ecology in terms of philosophy. So I think we will be taking these concepts into discussion during this keynote workshop. And the one that comes after this is augmented ecosystems, and we'll be talking about cynical culture. So we will have Mr. Funahashi and his conducting research on this cynical culture. And this is with the Sony laboratory in collaboration. So we will be having a panel discussion here during this workshop. So we talked about this remembering, or this idea of history, throughout our workshops, but moving forward, how do we change the way we live, or how do we change our systems or ideologies that we are trapped in, or these that we live in? I think this is something that will be a topic of discussion tomorrow. And at the very end, we will have Mr. Watanabe and many other speakers who will return with us again for the closing plenary for a short discussion. So I hope you can make that as well. So thank you so much for joining us today for a long period of time. This is the end of the forum for today. Inamura and Nahum, thank you so much for coming here today with us and closing with me. Thank you so much. Thank you to all the participants and everybody who joined us today as well. And tomorrow is our last day, but we hope you'll too. Continuing forward as well, if you would like to share your comments, your ideas, things you would like to share, please go ahead and go to our Facebook page too. If you still want to discuss or something, then please feel free to stay behind if you would like. But other than that, this is the end of our session. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow. Thank you very much.
いただけたらと思います。もう少しお話したい方も来られても大丈夫です。
ありがとうございました。
どうもありがとうございました。
はい。
ひろしさんもどうも。
どうも。
ひろしさんもね、本当に。
稲村さんもお久しぶりだ。
元気そうです。いい声出てましたね、今日。
それで
ゴングを
般若
してました。
心経が響いてました。
ああ、そうでしたか。いやいや、いい
昨日
時間でした
昨日
よ。
のね、セッションではね、リージェネラティブリーダーシップで出て、今日はね、山伏で出るっていう、なかなかね、すごい
本当にね、
貴重な。
特集さんも言ってたけど、レンジが広すぎて、なんかもうどこに自分がいるのか分からなくなってきましたよね。
まあなんか心地いい感じですね。はい。
本当に
余韻がね。
溶けていきますよね、なんか領域がそもそも。
本当だね。
いや、とてもいい機会だと思います。
今日も本当よかった。
なんか明日のプレビューじゃないけど、本もテーブルの上にあったりします。
おお、
ちょうど。
というかあれなんですよね。稲村さんが実はティモシー・モートンとか篠原さんを僕に紹介してくれた稲村さんなんです。
まあそうでした。それでそうやって明日のセッションにいるんだっていうのですごくやっぱり嬉しいなっていうつながりですね。
いろんなものが本当につながってるんですよ。
そうだね。すごいね。いやいや、本当に素晴らしかったな。また明日ですね。
うららさんもご一緒いただいてるな。うららさんありがとうございます。
はい。こんばんは。
こんばんは。本当にありがとうございます。遅くまで。
いいえ、明日も楽しみにしてます。
ありがとうございます。
通訳の皆さん、本当ありがとうございました。
本当に通訳の皆さん、本当に楽しかったです。
途中で逆転してすみません。
本当にすごいな。
本当にすごいですよね。本当に。皆さんも本当にありがとうございました。
本当に皆さんすごい。
クザにスイッチしてね、すごいですよね。
すごいね。
So, thank you so much for the translation.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Nahum san, thank you so much.
Thank you. I loved it. I loved it.
I was really surprised by your magic.
You were not expecting that, right?
I didn't expect it. No.
Yeah, it was a last-minute decision.
Yeah.
I was listening to the talk before, and I thought, I have to do this. Like we need some magic.
Yeah, that was good. That was good.
It was very nice to be in the same session. Thank you. Yeah, really enjoyed it. Thank you, Nahum.
No, thank you so much.
Okay, I will go ride my bicycle back home to see my baby. So maybe I'll jump in tomorrow. No, it's a very nice session. ありがとうございます。はい。
本当にありがとうございました。
じゃあ皆さんどうも。
はい、ありがとうございました。
ありがとうございました。
See you.